Right, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the video. So in this video we're going to look at the Newsnight programme that aired last night and featured Dominic Grieve, the traitorous MP who is determined to stop Brexit and was a big supporter of the amendment that passed yesterday, attempting to tie the hands of the next Prime Minister pushing through a no-deal Brexit. The show also features the pro-Brexit MP Andrew Bridgen. But before we get to that, let's address the nonsense I have been hearing saying the Queen is going to be asked to attend an EU summit. It's not going to happen. I'm not sure where this came from, because the main reason the Remaoners have been saying they are so against Boris Johnson proroguing Parliament is that they want to keep the Queen out of politics. So naturally I laughed when I heard this, and Newsnight brought it up during the programme, so here is the clip.
Well, Nick's here now. Nick, in recent months you've been emphasising how hard it would be for Parliament to stop a no-deal Brexit. Does today change the equation?
It's still hard, but for those MPs who want to stop a no-deal Brexit, two big things happened today. Pro-European Tories turned up in big numbers because they'd been alarmed by Boris Johnson's language on no deal. And 4 cabinet ministers abstained. Now, in normal times, if you do that, you'd be sacked from the cabinet. But that group do know that they face an almighty battle to stop a no-deal Brexit. In the first place, they may get the ball rolling on legislation, but will there be enough time? And even if there is a vote to stop a no-deal Brexit, Boris Johnson could just ignore it. Interestingly, on the Boris Johnson side, they're pointing out that today was a vote to stop the suspension of Parliament. That does not necessarily produce the same numbers for a vote to stop a no-deal Brexit. And they're thinking if the EU is really grumpy in the autumn, then maybe you'll find some of the people who rebelled today will be on their side in a few months' time.
And the Queen, really?
Well, desperate times call for desperate measures, but I think constitutional experts would suggest that asking the Queen to attend a European summit would probably breach the rules surrounding a constitutional monarch, which is keep her out of the political arena.
Thank you very much, Nick.
So there you see, even the BBC tit said it's not going to happen, so hopefully we don't have to hear any more about it. Now let's check out what Dominic Grieve had to say.
And to do that, we're joined by Conservative MP Dominic Grieve, who's done more than most to prevent a no-deal Brexit, and from Leicester, by his Brexit-backing colleague Andrew Bridgen. Welcome both. Dominic Grieve, let's start with you. I mean, look, you had a good day in the Commons today, but for people just trying to work out where on earth this goes and in parliamentary terms, how do you get from here to stopping a no-deal Brexit?
You get to stopping a no-deal Brexit because I don't think the House of Commons will ever accept it.
But sorry, can you just talk us through what you intend to do in steps of how you could stop it happening?
It depends very much on what the Prime Minister, who I assume will be Boris Johnson, decides to do. But if he continues to insist on carrying out a no-deal Brexit, what you're going to see is the Commons taking steps to try to give very clear indications, as indeed we did today, that it's unacceptable. And ultimately, I've always taken the view, and I repeat it again, that if he persists with this to the point where it's imminent, then his government will almost certainly fall.
But he just has to wait it out until the 31st of October. I mean,
he won't be there on the 31st. He won't be there on the 31st of October to carry it out. I mean, let's be quite clear about this. Governments are in office because they have a majority in Parliament. That's the bottom line.
You bring him down.
And if a government cannot command the confidence of the House of Commons, it will collapse. And there will either be a new administration formed or there will be a general election. I should make clear, I don't wish to bring about the collapse of a Conservative government, and I would therefore work with colleagues to try to find every device available to try to push a government away from a no-deal Brexit. But the bottom line is that a no-deal Brexit is unacceptable.
When you say every device available, would that include involving the monarch?
No, I think that's, I have to say, one of my duties as a Member of Parliament is to avoid drawing the monarch into politics. I don't know where this idea came from, but it certainly didn't come from me.
So the snivelling shitweasel plans to bring down the Boris Johnson government if he goes for no deal and leaves his EU buddies out in the cold without our 39 billion in their pockets. Maybe Boris Johnson needs to call an election on day one and get rid of these Remoaning fuckpigs who want to ignore the democratic wishes of the British public, sitting there smugly saying Boris Johnson won't be Prime Minister on the 31st of October, clearly showing he plans to vote Johnson out, likely soon after he wins the Tory leadership contest. It would seem the only way to get a true Brexit is through a general election to drain the swamp of tosspots like Dominic Soyboy Grieve, who wipes his arse with the democratic vote to leave the EU. I have a real dislike for this smarmy fuckpig. So let's move on and hear the Brexiteers' response.
All right, let's talk to Andrew Bridgen now. Andrew Bridgen, you've heard Dominic Grieve there saying that Boris Johnson, assuming it's him who becomes the next Prime Minister, won't get to October the 31st if he's bent on a no-deal Brexit course, that he'll be brought down by a no-confidence motion. And the numbers are very difficult, aren't they, for the government?
They are, but the reason they're difficult is we have a parliament that's completely out of touch with the sentiment and the will as expressed at the referendum by the majority of the people in the UK. You've got Dominic Grieve, who's rejecting the manifesto pledges that both he and I stood on back in 2017 to deliver Brexit, and that no deal was better than a bad deal. He and I both voted to trigger Article 50, knowing that if we didn't agree a deal, the default position is we're leaving with no deal. And the fact is that because Theresa May and her negotiators never persuaded the European Union that we were ever willing to leave without a deal, that's the reason that the deal that she came back with was so bad that it was unacceptable to both Parliament and the British people.
Would you accept that the next few months are going to involve some devilishly complex legal, constitutional and political matters, and that Boris Johnson, whatever his strengths as a campaigner and a communicator, is not the details man? I'm thinking of the Kipper regulation turning out to have come from the UK rather than the EU, you name it.
Well, I think what you're going to find next week is that Boris Johnson is overwhelmingly the choice of the members of the Conservative Party. Those are my association members in North West Leicestershire and Dominic's association members in Beaconsfield, that they want to get out of the European Union on the 31st of October. They want to then unite the party and the country, and ultimately Boris Johnson's best placed to beat Jeremy Corbyn in a subsequent general election. And I think what colleagues in the House of Commons on the Conservative benches will see next week is, I believe and I hope, the overwhelming majority of our members who supports Boris Johnson for Prime Minister and his policy towards Brexit. It's time for the party to row in behind our membership.
But even if they do in a way that surprises you very happily, the parliamentary arithmetic is still very, very difficult, isn't it?
It is, but then there is nothing for the Prime Minister to do. What we need is a determined Prime Minister. I think Boris Johnson's certainly that, who's going to steadfastly stick by not asking for an extension to Article 50, in which case all the legislation is there for us to leave. What it would require rebels to do, who wish to thwart the will of the British people, is to basically seize control of the order paper and manage to get all stages of a revocation bill of Article 50 through Parliament. There also aren't that many sitting days where that could happen. The alternative is voting down the government, which would require Conservative members to do that. They would then be possibly triggering a general election where they certainly will not be the candidates because they will lose the whip.
Andrew calls out the Remoaners in Parliament as out of touch with the will of the people, stating the fact that Shitweasel Grieve is going against what he stood for at the last election, which is a theme among a lot of MPs these days. I think anyone who goes against the government's manifesto that the people elected them on should be instantly sacked, as they no longer serve the people who put them in these positions of power. He points out that Theresa the EU appeaser made no attempts to even discuss no deal, causing her to come back from Europe with the surrender document she called a deal, which she then failed 3 times trying to push it through Parliament. I mean, the only good thing that come out of the Maybot deal was the fact that it forced her to resign. He states the obvious fact that if we don't get a good deal, then no deal is the default option. Even Dominic Grieve campaigned on that policy. It's amazing now when push comes to shove, Grieve backtracks to his Remain stance and plans to bring down the government. The Brexiteer ends with stating Parliament needs to get behind the next Prime Minister's Brexit policy, which we all know they won't, pointing out the only way for them to stop Boris Johnson in the time we have left is to go for a no confidence vote to trigger a general election, meaning these traitorous MPs would lose their seats and won't be able to stand again as Conservative MPs since they will lose the whip. Now let's hear the shitweasel response to this.
Would you be prepared to seize control of the order paper in the way that Andrew Bridgen was just...
Seizing control of the order paper is certainly a possibility, and it's been done before, but seizing control of the order paper to pass a piece of legislation revoking Article 50 is not possible. It's not possible procedurally because it needs a money resolution. So you have to be realistic about what is and is not possible. But all I can say is that there are a whole series of possibilities open to the House to register its dissent. And I come to the fundamental issue, which is we live in a parliamentary democracy. It is in itself quite extraordinary that a government should seek to govern contrary to the expressed wishes of the House of Commons. And obviously one right that a Prime Minister has is to call a general election if they want to do this. But if they don't, then they've got to listen to what the House of Commons is saying to them.
And very briefly, if the Prime Minister was Boris Johnson and he did call a general election, would you stand for a Conservative Party led by Boris Johnson?
The first question is, what's in the manifesto? Clearly, if one is going to stand, you're going to have to agree the manifesto. And just to make a small point, actually, one of the problems and one of the reasons we have this difficulty is the manifesto of 2017, in fact, proved to be unimplementable. That's one of the reasons why we're where we are.
Dominic Grieve, thank you very much.
You notice how he says there are many possibilities in ways that Parliament can register its dissent to the new Prime Minister. Why does he not say there are multiple ways to stop him proceeding with no deal? Maybe that's because there is fuck all they can really do. Maybe they're trying to apply pressure with false claims, which is similar to the usual Project Fear bullshit, these shitweasels spout on the mainstream media. He calls it extraordinary that a Prime Minister would consider ignoring the wishes of Parliament, forgetting that Parliament is meant to fulfil the wishes of the fucking people, not themselves or their buddies in the EU. So it's fucking extraordinary that you would consider the will of Parliament above the will of the people. Fuck what the traitors in Parliament want. The people voted out, you fucking idiot. Unreal. So I'm going to end the video there. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section below. Remember to like, subscribe and share the video as it helps the channel a lot, and I will see you all in the next one.